Okay, let's dive in. We all know the Bible is, well, one of the most influential books ever. But let's be honest, trying to piece its huge, sprawling narrative together can feel impossible. Today, we're looking at a book called Biblical Theology According to the Apostles, and it makes a pretty bold claim that the key to understanding this whole ancient story has actually been hiding in plain sight all along. So, how do you make sense of the Bible? Especially the Old Testament, right? It's this massive, sprawling collection of history and poetry and prophecy that was written over hundreds and hundreds of years. Just trying to find one single, coherent story and all of that can feel so overwhelming. Kind of like you're trying to put together a puzzle with a million pieces and no picture on the box. And you know what? It turns out we're not the only ones who feel that way. The whole field of biblical interpretation is, as one reviewer put it, a crowded and contested field. Even the top scholars can't seem to agree on the right way to connect all the dots. It's a story that is just full of really complex knots. Traditionally, the approach has been to look for what's hidden, beneath the surface. Scholars have spent their entire careers searching for these subtle little echoes, hidden patterns, and really deep links between texts. And that work is fascinating, for sure, but it can leave the rest of us feeling like we're totally missing the secret decoder ring. But what if the key wasn't hidden at all? What if the apostles themselves actually left us a roadmap? Well, the authors of this book argue that the answer has been sitting right there the whole time, out in the open, in plain sight. And they have a name for this roadmap, Summaries of Israel's Story, or SIS for short. These are these key moments in the New Testament where the writers literally pause what they're doing and just give a highlight reel of Israel's history. Think of Stephen's speech in Acts or some of Paul's big arguments in Romans. These aren't just random recaps. Nope, they are inspired and, more importantly, purposeful retellings of the entire story. The authors use this really great metaphor to explain their approach. They say if biblical interpretation is like an iceberg, most scholars spend all their time focused on the complex stuff hidden under the water. But this book, it proposes to just look at the massive, obvious part of the iceberg that's sticking right out of the water in plain sight. And by doing that, they say we can start to see the big picture just like the apostles did. Okay, so what does this actually look like when you put it into practice? Well, the book gives us a couple of really powerful examples that show this whole SIS method in action. First, take Stephen's speech in the book of Acts. You might just remember it as that super long history lesson he gives right before he gets stoned, but the authors argue it is so much more than that. Stephen is actually revealing this deep pattern. God's chosen servants, you've got Joseph, Moses, the prophets, they are always rejected by their own people, only to be vindicated and lifted up by God. And this, of course, brilliantly sets the stage for the story of Jesus, the ultimate rejected and vindicated Messiah. See, it's not just history, it's a theological pattern. Okay, now here's where it gets really, really interesting. The book of Hebrews also has one of these summaries of Israel's story. And the analysis of that summary leads to what is maybe the book's most original claim, that the Promised Land was never, ever just about a physical piece of real estate. From the very beginning, it was a symbol, a type, pointing forward to a future, heavenly inheritance, a permanent city built by God himself that you can only get to through resurrection. So what's the big takeaway from all this? This isn't just some neat academic trick. The authors are arguing that by really understanding how the apostles retold the story, we can learn how to faithfully tell it ourselves, today. They call it a biblical theological rule of faith. And they boil it all down to a few key principles for us. It means understanding those foundational covenants, the ones with Abraham, Moses, and David. It means seeing how all those old promises find their ultimate fulfillment in Christ. It even means using what they call warranted allegory, basically finding symbolic meanings that are actually justified by the text itself. And, crucially, it means being flexible. The apostles changed how they told the story for different audiences, and we can learn to do the same thing. Now, as powerful as this all sounds, the book isn't perfect. The review we're working from is quick to point out that while the main idea is pretty brilliant in a lot of ways, it also has some pretty significant blind spots. So let's break down that final verdict. On the one hand, this SIS method is hailed as a genuinely new and powerful tool. The chapters analyzing Acts and Hebrews are apparently real highlights. But then there are the weaknesses. The book's core assumption that the New Testament's way of reading the Old Testament is the only correct way, well, that's just kind of stated as fact, not really argued for. And it also largely ignores 2,000 years of church history, overlooking how generations of other believers have read and interpreted these very same texts. And that kind of leaves us with a much bigger question, doesn't it?
This book offers one really compelling answer for how to read an ancient foundational story. But it's a powerful reminder that how we interpret these stories isn't just about the past. It says everything about who we are and what we value today. So, what is the right way to retell a story that has literally shaped our world? That's definitely something we're thinking about.